I have an awesome podcast for you. You probably can't listen to it in one sitting, but that's all right.
Matt, I don't want to overpromise here. It's certainly not going to be awesome. It will be worth almost every single person's cost of admission, with the exception of our anchor producers,
Yes.
our Patreon producers, including producer Pierre, and anyone else who has given us one thin dime. But for everybody else, as long as it's free, it's acceptable.
And there's a pretty good chance you'll be able to do the whole thing in one sitting.
Yes.
And if you didn't do it in one sitting, it wouldn't be because of lack of time. It would be because of lack of interest.
As Doug said, Matt, when he wrote in on the Bill Simmons podcast Facebook page with such an unoriginal name, and then to paraphrase, because I can't find what the quote is, he thinks it's going to be bad content. Doug, yes, you were right.
Also, you, Doug.
Oh, Matt, Billy Boy done it again. If only Bill Simmons, Matt, could keep his mouth shut.
I don't understand.
Of course, that's his whole business model, so it might be antithetical to the cause. It's the Bill Simmons podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
Once again, Bill, proponent of cancel culture,
Yes.
it appears, now the target of cancel culture.
Yes.
I honestly thought the whole New York Times thing, didn't really care. Seemed
No.
like old news to me.
Bill's response to the whole New York Times thing's a totally different story.
His response in a podcast that we will, in theory, deal with somewhere between now and the end of July on the Bill Simmons podcast. I wanted to join Spotify for their human resources department. Now, remember when we had that huge multi-million-dollar, $100 million business deal, and we were like, this all sounds perfect. Oh, one quick thing. Who does your personnel? It's the Bill Simmons podcast.
Here we go.
Matt, 2 podcasts only.
Yes.
Great success.
Mercifully.
On the other hand, great failure. Something like 2 weeks, possibly plus ago. The first was with Bakari Sellers and Bill Burr. It was 1 hour, 48 minutes, and 27 seconds. I was pleasantly surprised with Bakari Sellers, who I knew nothing about. Not sure I'd ever heard of him.
Well, good news, Chris.
Oh, tell me, Matt.
You get to hear him all the time now.
How?
He's a new employee,
Oh, that's
or possibly independent contractor.
I'm surprised that yes. Somehow that didn't come up during the entire podcast where they spoke for like an hour. Weird. Same thing didn't happen when Bill talked to CC Sabathia.
Yeah, very strange.
0 seconds in, bad branding.
Today's episode of the BS Podcast,
Pearl Jam at 1:39. At 5:56, Buffalo Bill nominee.
just by expressing like a tiny bit of disgust toward Trump.
Was she a disgusting fat girl?
Okay, I was going to say, I'm disgusted with big fat girls.
Every time we do this, Matt, I think to myself, go back and watch just the clips from Signs of the Lambs. They're all over YouTube. So you can get one more Buffalo Bill quote. Never do it. At 7:31, Bill agrees with 2 things at once.
Was it that you basically said testicular fortitude or that you said it about Roger Goodell?
I think both.
It's that he basically said testicular fortitude, and the testicular fortitude had to do with Roger Goodell. Matt, at 10:45, maturity springing into action.
The maturity of some of the activists who just have more reps now with this stuff just kind of sprung into action in a different way than it did in 2014.
Luckily now, Matt, we're in a position where the activists are better at being activists due to their past activism.
So many reps. It's like the first time they were active, they just kept fucking it up. And then the coach was like, you just got to keep doing it until you get better.
Yep.
Slowly. Now, better.
Now their maturity fully sprung. Matt, the intersection of time and length is always of great interest to me personally. I always keep track of it on note cards on my bedside table. So I was pleased to hear Bill bring it up here at 11:55.
I guess it's going to take a long time before we actually can look back at this with some distance.
It does take time before you can look back.
Yes.
If there is no passage of time, perhaps for 8th dimensional beings, it is impossible to look backward. However, if you are looking back with some distance, it seems like it's a weird multi-dimensional conundrum that I can't even make fun of because I cannot adequately
comprehend.
express it. No.
It's like, you know how they say when the aliens who are able to perceive other dimensions, was it the 5th?
Well, I'm going to say yes, Matt, just to keep the conversation going.
So when those aliens come, we won't even be able to comprehend or articulate the things that they know and understand. That's the plane Bill's operating on.
I like money. I like the idea of making money and Bill making money. I'm fine with it. However, sometimes the segues are not worth the cost. like this one in 1959.
Because right now we have an empathy deficit in this country.
Quick break to talk about Miller Lite, the original light beer.
We have an empathy deficit.
Beer.
Yes. Getting paid. It almost seemed like that segue was without empathy. At 2027, speaking of drinking, still, Bill gets this wrong.
The social distancing drinks, which I took part of a couple times this weekend.
What part of the social distancing drinks did he take? Part of the social distancing
Yes.
drinks. You can take part.
Eaten.
Okay. It was like saying spaghetti wrong over and over again. And I was like, wait, I think he got me. Good. Yeah, you do take part in it, Matt. Thank you. Matt, Bill's depth of insight, still astonishing at 2151.
And you go back and you read some of the stuff and watch some of the questions that he asks.
Can you watch a question?
Well, you know how sometimes when questions come out of people's mouth, they take on the form.
Oh, we're talking about drugs. At 2234, Matt, your thoughts.
As the Sixers-Celtics series are going on.
Did the Sixers and Celtics play each other, or is he talking about simultaneous Sixers-Celtics series?
No, I think they played each other.
So he would not say the series are going on.
Correct.
He would say the series is going on.
Right, of course.
The Sixers-Celtics
series are going on.
We're going to call that subject-verb agreement. At 2848, the second Buffalo Bill nominee.
about talking about this.
I was on.
Are you talking about that big fat girl? And now, the Showcase Showdown. All right, Matt, I take issue with the theory and the delivery at 3329.
People always point at LeBron as like being the guy who can push the most change. And I don't actually think it's him if you're talking athletes. I think it's Mahomes.
First of all, push the most change. As always, Bill.
There's a bunch of change.
He can. I got a bag of quarters and I'm going down to the arcade, but I can't get it there. How? How can I carry it? Shoving. But is push change a thing?
No.
It sounds like a weird, like legislative idea.
Force change. Implement
That's
change.
what you do when you're at the dressing room at JCPenney's and your mom is making you try on a bathing suit. That's a forced change. Do you really think it's Pat Mahomes? Pat
No,
Mahomes,
it's not
great,
Pat Mahomes.
exceptional talent.
Yeah. Talks like a Muppet.
I have no question that he's got to be a great locker room leader. But in terms of being a societal leader,
Yeah.
LeBron, way better. Do I have an alternative? I don't. At 4659, this Joe Bluth nominee.
Just from the friends I've had who has it. I think it gets better when they're about 7.
Just from the friends I have.
I thought it might have been just from the friends I've had or have.
Just from the friends I've had or has.
From the friends, the ones that are no longer my friends, but also the ones that I currently have.
I thought he tried to insert the name of a Philadelphia Israeli restaurant in the middle of the comment.
Do you think that the list of friends Bill had is probably long?
Yes, I agree.
And getting longer by the day.
Yes, relative especially to the list of current friends.
Yes.
At 5945, this sounds like something Bill would have discussed at summer camp in 1984.
Just go dork it out.
Dork it out. This was the predecessor to Sunday Nights with Porn at Holy Cross. Just go dork it out. Guys, listen, I think we might be able to see some girls from the female camp across the lake. Do you want to go dork it out in the woods? At 1 hour and 18 seconds.
He's 7.
Matt, we've talked about this before. We assume this is Bill Burr's phone dinging.
Yes.
At no time does Bill, the head mug at the Ringer, at no point does he ever say, hey, Bill, I think we hear your phone dinging during an audio podcast.
Again and again. Ding.
Just do your job. Also, can we rely on nepotistic cousin Kyle to jump in there and take care of business? No. At 1:20:15, Bill's use of his life in ad copy, very organic.
I've been paying attention to the Whoop Fitness for a while now.
Definitely hasn't. This is how long he's been paying attention, Matt. Whoop Fitness said, we'd like to give you some money. He said, I'd like to start paying attention to the Whoop Fitness unnecessary article in plug.
Attention to the Whoop Fitness.
Listen to what he says about 17 seconds later. Somehow I was so irritated that I bookmarked that phrase 3 times.
Also knows if you're actually recovering from workouts. And unlike other watches out there.
Unlike other watches. Yeah, no shit. I thought it wasn't a watch. I thought it was like a personal fitness device. Are you telling me, Matt, that the Whoop Fitness tracker also tells time? Good Lord.
It's so much better than a watch, Chris. It's not like other watches. Whoop. We have not been paying attention to you for some time, but we will not f*** it up this bad.
Yes. It's good, however, that Bill completely understands how sleep works. Just listen to this at 1:20:59.
But when I sleep, apparently I'm just unconscious.
No shit.
That's how sleep works.
Yes,
If you were
yes.
conscious, you would not be asleep.
You would be considered awakeness. For someone who is so concerned about being woke, it's good that he's got the flip side of that coin 100% accurate. Sleep is when you're unconscious. Yes. Maybe he's trying to say, like, as opposed to the other times when I've drunken myself into a coma or I've been hit in the back of the head with a ball peen hammer.
Yeah. Also, some of those times I drove. But like back then, it wasn't a big deal.
Yes. And Whoop was like just a sparkle in its inventor's eyes. So I couldn't.
But he was thinking about
I
it.
couldn't track my rem when driving drunk in the Camaro that my parents bought me. Matt, we've for a long time criticized Bill's parenting choices.
Yeah.
Especially the
'cause they're
shows.
bad.
Well, that's the basis for the criticism. Especially the shows he lets his now 12-year-old son watch. Listen to Bill Burr's reaction when Bill Simmons says his son has been watching F is for Family at 121:46.
He's still watching your Netflix show. It's in his.
Oh, all right.
Bill Burr sounds very, very confident that this is a good idea. F is for Family, very funny show. My wife, who is an adult woman with children, is like, are you going to watch that show? I'm going to have to go into the other room because it makes me sad and offended. Bill, 12-year-old, knock yourself out, kid. Bill Burr continues to almost inaudibly express his concern.
My son, the biggest fan of inappropriate animated comedy out of anybody. Like, not inappropriate, but for when you're 12.
Yeah.
And it's
I feel like Bill Burr there is trying to be like, he's like looking at his publicist being like, is he trying to get me to agree that 12-year-olds should watch this? Because I'm not going to do that.
Doesn't he have to like read me my rights or something before I agree to this? That was definitely not a, yeah, I understand, keep talking. That was a, yeah, really?
not inappropriate, but for when you're 12.
Yeah,
At 123:34.
It just became more and more and more.
I think that was Bill Burr's "you are a bad parent" alarm going
Doesn't
off.
he do it at one point? Doesn't he say something at one point? I feel like he might have.
Oh, if he did, I missed it. At 124:18, listen to Bill, who finally has enough reps, as he points out over and over again, that he knows what he's doing on a podcast with this segue.
When it's all under one roof, that the best guy is going to fight the best guy. Like, you don't have to wait.
What else do you care about? When do you think you'll be able to do comedy on a stage again?
It sounds like he's on a bad first date. So do you like any movies? Yeah, I like some movies. Books? Uh-huh. At 125:43, we're not talking about munitions.
I always, like, in times of whatever, I always just I get laser focused on other things.
Are we in a time of whatever right now, Matt?
I think considering the definition of that is totally and completely meaningless, probably.
So whenever is a time of whatever.
Right.
So we're in one of those right now. He gets laser focused on other things. Definition of other things, also just about as fucking general as times of whatever. At all times, Bill is laser focused on all things. At 129:05.
You got to play the game, because if your show wins an Emmy,
Good job, Cousin Kyle. Maybe the idea was that Bill Burr like bumped up against the microphone, and then Bill, being the leader that he is, or Cousin Kyle being the producer that he is, were like, should we ask him to just say that great thing again? No, move on.
No
Too
chance.
embarrassing. At 133:47, possible out-of-context theater.
Then you go and you got to cram everything. Then you got to fly back.
I think the point Bill is making here is that if you're doing a business trip, you have to go to wherever you're having the business trip.
Right.
And then you have to cram everything in, because presumably business trips must be done very fast, and then get home. At 133:57, I can't believe you can revise history this close to the time when history occurred.
We just joined Spotify 3 months ago.
Did they join Spotify?
Spotify purchased them.
That's like saying that the Chipotle burrito bowl I had for lunch joined Chris. No. The carnitas and chicken, double rice, double beans, was consumed
Double.
by Chris. Double rice, double beans.
They charge you for that?
No.
Oh, wow.
But they would charge you for double protein.
Yeah.
Chipotle,
We love ya.
the Bill Simmons podcast, runs on Chipotle. Don't sue us, Duncan, for taking your catchphrase. America runs on Duncan.
Oh, I got it.
Duncan! At 136:34, what a difference a few cars make.
So you could actually feel a difference and see a difference
oh, you could
with the less cars.
The less cars makes a visible and also tactile difference.
With the less cars.
At 137:24, I'm assuming this has to do with the aliens.
No travel. Let's try to get the Earth back for a week and things like that. There might be things to learn.
Finally, People are no longer traveling, and the Earth is again ours.
Let's get it back.
Let's make this day our Independence Day. Independent from the aliens. At 1:47:58, this should be his sign-off, always.
Hope you're doing your thing.
So it's like at the beginning, he says, here we go.
Yeah. Hope you're doing your thing.
Yes. You know what? I had been thinking about whether I was going to do my thing, and then after his suggestion, I decided, yeah, I am going to stretch out and do my thing. We'll be back after this.
Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.
Matt, we use Anchor.fm for the Bill Simmons podcast. Anchor.fm allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, and it's free. Anchor will not only let you record and edit, you can also distribute your podcast to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more through Anchor. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership, which is handy for the Bill Simmons podcast. Anchor.fm has everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. I read this book by this Chinese author. It's called The Three-Body Problem. Have you read it?
No.
The aliens send 2 protons from their alien planet to Earth, and they unfold the protons into 8 dimensions, which makes them so big they envelop the entire planet, and then write some kind of code on them, and then refold them back into 3 dimensions, and then shoot them across space, possibly time, I don't really remember, and then they get to Earth, and then they f*** a bunch of stuff up. There's 2 sequels. But what I wonder is, are those aliens able to look back over time with some distance?
With some distance.
Assuredly, yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Matt, the second, a.k.a. final podcast of...
2 weeks ago.
All right. Jalen Rose, unnecessary. Judd Apatow, extra unnecessary. And then crammed in between the 2006 redraftables.
Yes.
241-18.
This is fucking unbelievable. It just makes no sense. This was a Friday podcast, I think, right? I think what happened was...
It was a Thursday. It was June 11th.
He released it on Thursday night for
Yeah.
listening on Friday, yeah.
Well, you can listen whenever you want now. That's the great thing about podcasts.
I mean, I feel like this was... Shit, we didn't get one out on Wednesday. You know what? I'll just cram a bunch of stuff into this Friday one.
I don't know anybody who operates like that.
Also, nothing will have anything to do with the other thing. Jalen Rose, redraftables, Judd Apatow.
We call this the empathy for Miller Lite approach. 31 seconds in. This has got to be, as we've said before, coming from ZipRecruiter, but I don't understand why they choose this word.
If you're actively hiring, ZipRecruiter will invite candidates to apply to your most urgent roles.
Remember, Matt, when we first got out of college and we were like, what are you going to do? Apply for a role? It sounds like in Soviet Russia, bread lines and role applications. Pearl Jam at 1:55. And then, as Jalen said at 4:47, this, and I remain confused.
For me to see people just grow into their man bones.
Is man bones a Jalen thing?
I don't know.
I don't listen to his stuff. Maybe all the Jalen Rose fans can tell us if man bones is something he goes to. At 7:13, this laughter. At 10:50, this laughter. At 14:52, when talking about someone who many believe was murdered, this is probably the most dignified and respectful way to phrase it.
Well, remember Trayvon when the Trayvon Martin thing happened, and
Nothing more mature than starting out with, well, member.
Yeah.
Then to go on to say, when the Trayvon Martin thing happened, when he was killed. Seems like when we are talking about someone who was killed, possibly murdered, you might want to go a little bit further than just call it the thing.
The thing.
Yeah. Matt, remember how we talked just a couple of minutes ago about pushing change?
Yes.
I want you to think about that when you listen to this at 1640.
because this is something that could actually influence real change.
Influence real change.
That's better.
But can you influence change?
No, you can't.
I mean, it's a weird crossover of two intangible concepts.
Yes.
Change and having an influence on the change.
Yeah.
Better than pushing change. At 26-25, Jalen goes back to this well.
I think LeBron got his man bones when he left Miami.
I like this time. It wasn't even grew him, or what did he say the first time?
Grow into.
Grow into. This time, LeBron didn't even have. So the first guy, I don't remember who it was.
No, I think it was LeBron both times.
So
maybe.
originally, LeBron had his man bones, but he had to grow into them, get used to them.
They
right?
were too
like
big.
new
They were
shoes.
poking out his shoulders.
Yeah. Now he got them.
Yes.
He didn't even have any man bones, and then he got. By the way, man bones just sounds like a euphemism for erection.
Yes, but multiple.
Yeah.
Like it was. It seems like something that would come out of a Beverly Cleary book, but like the ones where they're like, "We're not publishing this." Jesus, Beverly. At 27:55, it is clear Bill gets 2/3 of the way into the sentence and has no idea how he's going to do the final third.
You pushed him to the tail end of it, and he still got out.
What? The tail end of what?
It.
I think this is about when the Pacers played the Bulls in the finals, the conference finals in 1998.
Yeah.
You pushed them to the tail end of
It.
it being the series, Game 7, and then they got out of it, the game, the series. So clear.
God.
At 29:08, more specificity.
Whereas you guys could always, get to whatever point total.
Get to the point total.
It's like
which one?
It's like
whatever.
It's like playing roulette. How about 38? We can get to that. 79. We can get to that. 114. Yep. At 32:20, affirmation.
Do you agree with that? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, we
Not listening. Definitely not.
We'll be right back after this.
Time out! The Great Space Coaster will return after these messages.
Matt, as always, we want to thank the people that support us monetarily, not the people that support us emotionally, because honestly, emotional support doesn't pay the bills the way Josh N., Jeff G., Scott B., Sean, and our friends at College Football Brothers Podcast support us with money. They do it through Patreon, patreon.com/bspodpod. You can also support us as David P. and Scott B. do through Anchor. That's anchor.fm/bspodpod. David, as we always say, you're giving us too much money. Also, I think Scott B. is possibly giving us money through Anchor and Patreon. Scott, it's not worth it. Thank you very much to our producers. I like to spread out on a business trip. Maybe order several pieces. That's pizzas.
Wait, what was the alternative?
Pizzas. However I said it. See, what I do is listen to myself talk and then comment on it.
Yeah, I didn't even hear that one, though.
Blunder through.
I'm in. Now back to the program.
At 35:24, this is not litigation.
It's probably a waste of this podcast's time to re-litigate it.
You had me at waste of time. At 42:28, it sounds like what Bill is implying is that all ex-players are dumb.
House, would you rather have an ex-player or a smart person run your team?
Right. Bill is suggesting the Venn diagram of smart people and ex-players.
Never cross.
No overlap. Seems like the kind of thing where somebody who is deeply invested in his personal relationships with NBA folks and other sports folks would maybe want to walk that one back. At 44:40, if the microphone is recording, try not to have it record this.
Is a really interesting snapshot.
I was hoping it would be a fart.
Matt, it would be pretty tough. I mean, you would have to be farting with a lot of effort or a lot of body contortion to get a microphone to pick that up. Because believe me, I've tried.
Yeah, effort. Definitely effort.
At 46:13.
2 hours to go.
And I remember my column had really taken off at this point.
Great job on the column, Bill. But before that, what don't you know?
There were some red flags that we did not know how to take into account in the mid-2000s.
How to take into account?
How to take into account.
At 46:52, maybe let the scientists handle the science.
The science of studying, like, just the brain and mental makeup of a player, and there's so much more emphasis now on mental health.
So was he talking about mental illness or the brain or whatever the fuck mental makeup is? Like, if you really want your brain lips to pop, Matt.
Chris, he's talking about nonsense.
Yes, well, I think that's ultimately the thesis of the Bill Simmons podcast. At 48:04, how many C's?
Classic.
Yeah, all right, 3.
At 48:19, Matt, how many C's?
Classic.
2.5?
We'll go with that.
At 53:37, this Joe Bluth nominee.
Well, I'll tell you this. Well, I want to save some of the Rondo stuff for when we get to them, but I'll tell you this.
At 53:54, how many C's?
Rondo was clearly good.
2.
Yeah, I'm going to say 2. At 54-13, this Joe Bluth nominee.
It was the one piece they wouldn't put in.
At 54-26, this has to be because he lives with a teenage girl.
So that happened.
Just the laziest phrase. You don't need to put that in there. That's like the dangling so.
Yeah.
No, don't say that happened. We know it happened. Matt, when you talk about a quote and then you say, quote, what you should next say is what was said verbatim. Bill fails at 54-27.
Here's what I wrote on the Ty Thomas pick. Quote, in the draft diary. I love that pick for them.
In the draft diary, not part of the quote.
Yes.
You should not include that after you say the word quote. At 54-49, wasn't Bill like a political science major?
I think so.
All right, listen to his
least he tells us.
misunderstanding of history.
What was the Balkan Islands? What was the Falkland crisis?
The Falkland Islands, or the Falkland crisis. At 56-34, try to figure out these words.
Diary that I researched was true that they had.
Oh, I think he says which was true. He just says rurs. At 57-49, here's something Bill wrote in the past.
I had a joke in the draft diary I'm still proud of 14 years later.
What a shock. Has this guy ever produced something that he is not eternally proud of? Maybe Ben. At 57-59, apparently Dan Patrick's role was not what you normally associate, like, say, host.
Dan Patrick was the narrator of this draft?
He's the one who's giving things like stage direction, location, ambiance. 59-04, humor is so fleeting.
I don't know as the years pass if the humor has stayed in place the way it did in the moment.
So the humor was there, but we're not sure if it stayed that way, or at least the way it was in the moment.
At 103.25.
And it's honestly the first trade like that of the thing.
Of which thing?
The thing.
Does he mean of the draft? Of the generation? Of the decade?
Yeah, probably decade.
At 103.38. Turns out Bill is great and knows a lot of stuff.
And I remember he asked me for advice.
Bill has been so much more self-congratulatory of late. He loves to tell podcast guests about previous podcast guests.
Right.
He loves to name drop. And then now, Daryl Morey. Turns out he was asking Bill for advice. At 105.33, trajectory. He means trajectory.
His whole career trajectory is just...
I think
it sounds like an engine trying really hard to start.
If you were plotting the flight path of a jurist, you have a trajectory.
I'll be here all week.
At 105.58.
In that final game, put his ball... At that whole series, he put his balls on the table, but especially that last game. He really won my respect.
When you put your balls on the table metaphorically, is the point that you are in some way wagering them? Or that you're exposing them so that people can see that you have them,
and they're so big,
and they have a great size, and that people then are
impressed
or scared, or why is there such a difference in circumference between the left and the right? At 107.22 thing,
we were talking about in the 2005 thing about how Marvin Williams was this
at 107.31. Judge.
Really heavy lower body.
It was almost like the C was after the H.
On heavy?
Yeah.
There's no C on
heavy. I know.
At 112.38, Judge.
And I think it's important to remember he got hurt.
Well, first of all, it's important to remember. Also, CH.
So that's 2 to 0. At 122.22, etc.
Etc., etc.
At 122.53, unnecessary article.
The Portland's just taken so many hits over the years.
At 124.22, what does he have?
Because he has this throwback, awesome, out-tools Dirk Nowitzki. We come out of that game 4.
There's no now. Throwback does not modify anything.
Nope.
Awesome does not. Yes. Awesome does not modify anything. Dirk Nowitzki, throwback is not modifying Dirk. Awesome not modifying Dirk. At 127.23, more syntax.
One great thing with him is just the longevity of just... He's still going.
The longevity of just he's still going. The he's still going took a long time. That's what he means.
No, it lasts a long time.
Not in my house. At 132.19, guess what was great? A thing Bill did.
Like at Grantland, we were really ahead. I feel like we were really ahead of the game those first couple of years with the way we were covering basketball.
At 132.47.
And I got to say, I ended up winning.
Bill did something great.
Yeah.
142.48.
I was just looking at my trade value list to make sure I never put him on a trade value thing.
He's looking at the list to see if he was ever on a thing.
Like, Jesus Christ, it was right there.
Yes. He was like, oh no, I just said list. I'd like to introduce myself to... Wait, what does he say?
Allow myself to introduce myself.
At 148.29, this is like the opposite of Reese's Peanut Butter Cups.
He was in multiple gun things after that. So that happened.
Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, Matt, of course, two great tastes
Of
that
course.
taste great together. This, multiple gun things.
Multiple gun things.
So that happened.
So that happened.
The lazy man's way out after saying things. At 149.11, more bad talking.
But it was said by somebody who had a basketball analyst job.
At 149.57, does Bill think Jeremy Lin's name is Linsanity?
Insanity was getting his insanity on.
At 158.20, it's weird that this fan base was very loyal.
They have a rabid fan base that is super loyal. It's unusual in these times.
I would say if you have a rabid fan base, it would not be unusual that they are super loyal. At 159.15, thing.
When you did the Doc and Daryl thing.
At 202.54, this laughter. At 204.11, my favorite turn of phrase.
After having stinked it up or whatever they did.
Man, he really stinked it up.
Bill took a break after thinking to himself, hang on a second, can I use stink this way? Collected his thoughts and then said, stinked.
After having stinked it up.
Maybe he did it by instinct.
Okay.
At 206.44, Bill here poses a question.
They say flu-like symptoms.
Flu-like symptoms.
Yeah, whatever that means.
Here's what it means. Fever or feverish, chills, cough, sore throat, runny or stuffy nose, muscle or body aches, headaches, fatigue or tiredness. Some people may have vomiting and diarrhea, though this is more common in children than adults, according to the CDC.gov. That's what that means.
Thanks, Chris.
At 2:15:08, again, metaphysics, man. I just can't come up with any other explanation.
But you're holding on the hope for, way beyond.
Sure.
Hope, a tangible thing that you can hold on, not to, just holding on it. And then something about time.
For way beyond. For way beyond.
Judd
when the
Apatow
hope
has
should
got to
be
be like, what in the is this guy talking about?
At least this is going to buy me the goodwill so they give Staten Island a great review. That's all I'm worried about. At 2:21:03, I'd like to hear the all-time rankings.
It's got to be one of the strangest sibling combos that we've had.
That we have had. I love when Bill talks about something historically and then takes personal ownership of it.
At 2:28:10, this laughter. At 2:36:43, unnecessary article.
But it's like the Animal House and Caddyshack and all those things.
Matt, at 2:39:07, we should not throw stones living in the glass house of bad audio. But Bill's audio somehow turns to shit.
All right, so July 12th.
It's like the mic got unplugged or something. He started using the computer mic.
Yeah, it hits a little close to home.
Yeah, but we were recorded. And man, it was a pain in the ass.
Yes. Or that time when I didn't record your audio and then just used old Matt clips. At 2:40:09, this is what all the listeners have come for.
What's your iPad battery right now?
At 2:40:19.
I just thought you were going to zip away.
Zip away. Matt, it's now time for the Bill Simmons podcast to zip away.
Zip away.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
Hope you're doing your thing. See you next time.
What would double X porn be?
You get to see boobs, and you can see the vagina, but there's no penetration. That sounds right?
Matt, without any hesitation, I know exactly what it is, Chris. I know exactly.
No, I don't even know that particular thing exists. But to me, like, the X is like the softcore stuff, like the stuff that's on, like, when you were a kid and you had to like wiggle the antenna to make the Cinemax
that
come
wasn't
through.
the antenna, but I know what you mean.
So that was like, to me, it was like you saw boobs, but nothing else, and there definitely wasn't penetration. So the middle ground is there are vaginas in this, just nothing happens to them. You gotta cut it.
That's how we're ending the episode.